What if I told you that biases and prejudices are not necessarily evil? These are things that all of us humans do. We find patterns in things. Some of these patterns are temporary, while some of them are permanent. And when it becomes permanent in an ever-changing world, that's when problems arise. I want to explore with you, what are prejudices?
Our brains are constantly bombarded with sensory information, estimated to be around 11 million bits per second. This overwhelming influx of data highlights the crucial role of attention, which acts as a filter, selectively processing only a tiny fraction of this information. While we experience this massive stream of bits, our conscious processing capacity is significantly limited, estimated to be only around 40-50 bits per second. This bottleneck means we can only focus on a very small number of things at any given moment, explaining why our attention span can be easily overwhelmed and why multitasking is often less efficient than focusing on one task at a time. Given our limited conscious processing capacity, heuristics become essential for navigating the complexities of daily life. These mental shortcuts enable rapid decisions by filtering and simplifying information. For example, we might use the availability heuristic to judge the likelihood of an event based on how easily examples come to mind. While efficient and often accurate, heuristics can also introduce biases and errors in judgment. Because they rely on simplified information and pre-existing assumptions, they can lead us to make irrational decisions or overlook crucial details. Understanding how these mental shortcuts work is vital for improving decision-making and mitigating potential biases. As we repeatedly rely on certain heuristics to navigate similar situations, these mental shortcuts can solidify into well-worn cognitive pathways, essentially becoming expressways in our thinking. Initially chosen for their efficiency, these heuristics become deeply ingrained habits of thought, often operating unconsciously. This entrenchment can be beneficial, allowing for rapid and effortless responses in familiar scenarios. However, it also carries the risk of cognitive rigidity. When a heuristic becomes an expressway, we may apply it automatically, even when it's no longer the most appropriate or accurate approach. This can lead to systematic biases and a resistance to considering alternative perspectives, hindering our ability to adapt to new information or changing circumstances. The path from pattern recognition to prejudice begins with the brain's natural tendency to identify and categorize information for efficiency, a mental shortcut. These initial patterns are often harmless observations, but they become solidified when reinforced by stories, whether personally experienced or passed down through generations. These stories add context and meaning, creating a narrative that supports the initial pattern. However, the crucial element that transforms a simple pattern into a prejudice is emotion. When a pattern is linked to feelings like fear, anger, or even a sense of validation, it becomes a deeply held conviction. The emotional charge acts as a powerful adhesive, making the resulting prejudice resistant to logical correction and alternative perspectives, essentially hardening the shortcut into a biased belief that influences future interactions and judgments. Once a prejudice is formed from a pattern reinforced by story and cemented by emotion, it can trigger a domino effect, influencing subsequent snap judgments. These snap judgments, rooted in the now biased belief, lead to discriminatory actions and unfair treatment at an individual level. Over time, these individual actions can accumulate and become embedded within systems and institutions. For example, biased hiring decisions based on snap judgments about a candidate's ethnicity can lead to a workplace lacking diversity. Similarly, snap judgments made by authority figures can result in inequitable enforcement of rules and policies, perpetuating systemic inequalities. The initial prejudice, therefore, acts as the catalyst, setting off a chain reaction where biased snap judgments contribute to and reinforce discriminatory systems. When prejudices get personal, that's when our biases turn into bigotry. Biases often serve as cognitive shortcuts, allowing us to quickly categorize the world around us. However, these streamlined thought processes can morph into bigotry when faced with strong fear and emotions. The instinctive reaction to perceived threats can cause us to cling tightly to our biases, transforming flexible views into rigid beliefs. Instead of engaging in open dialogue, we often retreat into echo chambers, reinforcing the very prejudices that fuel our fears. The transition from flexibility to rigidity resembles a tree that gradually loses its leaves. As it becomes barren, it limits the shade of kindness and understanding. When our beliefs harden like bark, they obscure our emotional connections and cast aside those we categorize as outsiders. Recognizing this pattern invites us to reassess our automatic responses. By embracing the unease of questioning our biases, we can nurture a more compassionate and welcoming community. Examining prejudice from a legal perspective reveals intricate layers of complexity. Often, the patterns we observe in society aren't rooted solely in empirical facts. They are significantly influenced by personal experiences and deep-seated emotions. These emotions can breed intolerance, fostering an environment where closed-mindedness flourishes. When individuals are unwilling to consider alternative viewpoints, it leads to a rigid form of thinking often characterized as bigotry. As these beliefs become emotionally charged, the consequences can become serious. Hostility towards certain groups can escalate, resulting in harmful actions and discriminatory practices. Understanding this legal dimension is crucial. It can inform policies aimed at reducing prejudice and promoting inclusivity while highlighting the necessity of empathy and open dialogue. By addressing the emotional underpinnings of bias, we can work toward a more just society. The saying goes that when thoughts transform into actions, those actions in turn shape attitudes and establish societal norms, particularly when opportunities present themselves. This process highlights how deeply ingrained beliefs can influence behavior and ultimately the fabric of our communities. Discrimination manifests as unequal treatment based on various protected traits, such as race, gender, and sexual orientation. It underscores the importance of creating environments that promote equity and understanding rather than perpetuating bias. To effectively close the gap of inequality, we must focus on changing the context in which these beliefs thrive, rather than merely attempting to change minds. This approach recognizes that cultural and social frameworks play a crucial role in shaping attitudes. We must prioritize teaching individuals how to engage with facts critically and conduct thorough research. By fostering critical thinking skills, we empower people to question assumptions and challenge prejudices. In doing so, we can cultivate a more inclusive society where diversity is celebrated and everyone has the opportunity to thrive. Bias and prejudice can create a division known as the us versus them mentality. Once these attitudes take root, they can spread rapidly within groups, fostering an environment of exclusivity and animosity. This division often begins with stereotypes, oversimplified views about a particular group. When individuals within a community share these notions, they reinforce each other's biases, making it easier to dismiss or dehumanize those perceived as other. Social media can amplify this effect, allowing prejudiced ideas to circulate quickly. In online spaces, people often align with like-minded individuals, further entrenching their beliefs. As the divide grows, misunderstandings and hostility can escalate, leading to conflict. The cycle becomes difficult to break, isolating groups and perpetuating inequality. Ultimately, it's essential to recognize and challenge our own biases to foster a more inclusive society. By promoting empathy and understanding, we can bridge these divides and combat prejudice effectively. The power of collective belief systems can reshape the very fabric of society, often morphing into policies that perpetuate inequality. These entrenched views, whether rooted in culture, religion, or ideology, can overshadow reasoned discourse and critical thinking. Instead of fostering inclusivity, they often create rigid structures that marginalize specific populations. This phenomenon not only restricts opportunities for those deemed other, but also impoverishes the broader community by stifling diverse perspectives and innovations. When groups enact these belief systems into routines and policies, the ramifications are profound. We see communities devaluing the contributions of certain individuals, effectively erasing their narratives and capabilities from the communal story. As these policies crystallize into social norms, they become nearly invisible, justifying disparities in education, healthcare, and employment. The challenge lies in unpacking these layers of bias, encouraging a collective re-examination of how beliefs translate into lived realities, and actively dismantling systems that serve to widen societal divides. A great example of this is when redlining and apartheid served as stark illustrations of how systemic policies can deny generations of marginalized communities access to opportunities that foster wealth and well-being. These practices not only segregated neighborhoods, but also entrenched socioeconomic disparities by dictating where families could live, work, and learn. When school funding is directly tied to property taxes, it creates a cycle of disenfranchisement, where students in wealthier neighborhoods receive a higher quality education at the expense of those in underfunded areas, often inhabited by communities of color. The ramifications extend beyond education, impacting health outcomes significantly as well. Communities historically subjected to disinvestment frequently face inadequate healthcare access, resulting in stark health disparities that reflect their socioeconomic marginalization. Hate crimes represent the most extreme manifestation of prejudice and discrimination within the legal framework. While prejudice reflects internal bias and discrimination manifest through unequal treatment, hate crimes involve the active targeting of individuals or groups based on those same protected characteristics. These acts not only harm victims physically or emotionally, but also send a message of intimidation to entire communities, undermining social cohesion and equality. The law recognizes hate crimes as aggravated offenses because they threaten the safety and dignity of marginalized groups and challenge the fundamental principles of justice and human rights. Understanding this progression from bias to unequal treatment to criminal violence is essential for preventing harm and fostering accountability. Reducing prejudice begins with awareness. Pausing before forming judgments allows us to interrupt automatic stereotypes and question our assumptions. Individuating, consciously focusing on the person rather than the group they belong to, helps us see unique stories, values, and experiences instead of broad categories. By asking for evidence and challenging our first impressions, we begin to replace bias with curiosity and understanding. Over time, this mindful approach transforms not only how we perceive others, but also how we contribute to more inclusive, fair, and empathetic communities.